Okay, now for us, unfortunately, we're not always going to be given the graph. Sometimes we're going to have to graph this to be able to find where it's going to cross the x-axis. So, as you can see, like another name we're going to call this is solving quadratics. And the other way that they could tell us that this is going to happen is instead of having this y equals, they could have a 0 on this side. So, we're going to look at this, and we're actually going to graph this to find where it's going to cross the x-axis. So, if you remember from last week, we graphed this by finding the vertex first. And I find the vertex by doing negative b over 2a. So, in this case, my negative b would be negative 3. And my 2, and I would have 1. Because a is equal to 1 if it doesn't have a number out here, which would give me negative 1.5. Then I'm going to pick 1 point above, or a little bit below this, so negative 2. 1 point a little bit above, so negative 1. If I plug those numbers in, so first we'll just plug in negative 2 and see what we get. I plug in negative 2, and you would get 0. So when you take negative 2 and you plug it in for all of these x's, you get 0, which is good because we found when the y value is 0. If you plug negative 1.5, you get negative 0.25. And if I plug in negative 1 into there, I would just be left with 0 again. So then we go to graph it just to make sure that we did this right. So if I go to negative 1.5, it would be about here, and then negative 0.25 would be, so we're going to estimate and say it's right about it there. Then our next point is negative 2, 0, and negative 1, 0. And I get this nice graph, and we can see it crosses the x-axis at negative 2, and it crosses the x-axis at negative 1. Let's do one more example. Again, we'll start this by finding the vertex. And when I find the vertex, I'm going to go negative b over 2a. When I do that, I'm going to plug everything in. So negative b, just be negative 1, over 2a. So then we'll do 2 times negative 1, which that is going to give me just 0.5. Yep, so it'll give me 0.5. Then I'm going to choose a number below, which would be 0, and a number above, which would be 1. When I plug in 0, I'm going to find that this will give me 6. When I plug in 0.5, I'm going to find that gives me 6.25. And when I plug in 1 into all of here, I'm going to find that gives me 6. Now normally we would stop here and graph, but my issue is we are looking for the x-intercept, and that only happens when y equals 0. And as if you see, if we tried to graph that, so again our points was 0.5, 1, and 0, and that was 6, 6.25, and 6. You'd see I'm a little off the graph, not too much, but I'm a little off. So I'd have a point about right there, and right there. And even when I try to go down, it's going to be hard for me to estimate where those things cross the y-axis. So we're going to need some more points. So we're going to have to go back up here and get a couple more points. So the next points that I would do is I would go -1, and I would go 2 on this other side and see what that gave me. If I plug that in, that would give me 4 and 4. And again, we're still not at y being 0. So we have to go another one out. So we'd go to -2. And we would go to 3. And when we plug that in, we'd find that -2 gave us 0 and 3 gave us 0. So we hit the jackpot because we got 0 when we did -2. And that's what we really wanted y to be. We wanted y to be 0. So then again, I'm going to extend my chart because we had to go to -1, then -2, and that's where we got 4 and 0. So now I have a much better idea where this crosses the x-axis because it crossed at -2 and +3 when we went the other way. And then we had a point at -1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it gave me a much clearer picture when I went out. So the big thing is, you can't actually stop graphing this thing until they cross the y-axis at 0. So you can't stop graphing this thing until you get that point over there. So some of these take a little bit because it might take a couple steps before you get there. That's the big thing. You gotta make sure that the y value is 0.